I've made a lot of videos talking about the Steam Deck and all the features and all the things you could possibly do with it. I've compared performance against Windows and SteamOS. I've used it as my only computer before. And of all those things, I constantly get asked, is it good for emulation? And without a doubt, the Steam Deck is phenomenal for emulation. But is it the best choice for emulation? Because the way I see it, the Steam Deck offers amazing emulation performance, but it's not quite as easy as something like the Retro Pocket 4 Pro or the Odin 2. Those devices being similar or cheaper priced, it does make you consider if all you want is emulation, should you just buy one of those devices, or should you pony up the extra cost for a Steam Deck? The Steam Deck offers a lot of advantages. The Steam Deck has larger game compatibility. You can have more emulators for other types of consoles that aren't simply allowed on Android or doesn't really seem feasible for those other cheaper devices. A main example I think of, Wii U. I don't see any Wii U emulators popping up anytime soon for Android, but there is a very strong and very good Wii U emulation available on Windows and Linux already, so you don't have to worry about whether or not you can even emulate those consoles in the first place. And there's a certain level of, software development that these emulators have hit many, many years ago that only recently these Android emulators are really starting to make their stride. In comparison, the Steam Deck has far more stable emulation in comparison to a lot of the Android emulators out there. The Steam Deck offers for emulation a greater degree of flexibility and allows you to far more optimize performance and try to get the most you possibly can out of the hardware, with Android in comparison being a little bit more restrictive, allowing you to optimize it the best you can, but there simply isn't enough knobs you can turn on an Android device to get every bit of performance you possibly could, like you could on a Steam Deck. But for that increase in flexibility, you do get an increase in complexity. A lot of these settings aren't easily understandable for newcomers to the scene. It is not the most user-friendly experiences sometimes, and there are wrappers or themes you could install to simplify the process, like EmuDeck, Emulation Station, that do simplify the process. But in terms of picking up and getting going and playing games, I would say Android has Steam Deck beat, because when you buy a Steam Deck, you still have to set it up in the first place to even have emulators, which isn't immediately apparent for those who are new to the scene, versus you could just go buy a Retro Pocket 4 Pro, Odin 2, or even the Anbernic 556, and be able to pick it up and just immediately start playing games, because the vast majority of these handhelds even come pre-installed with games. The cheapest version of the Steam Deck is $350. That's a great price, and you can even get models of the Odin 2 all the way up to the same price as OLED models of the Steam Deck. So sometimes you're not even saving all that much, but I've made plenty of videos talking about the base model, the specs of stuff like the Odin 2, which covers basically everything you could theoretically need, all the way up until Switch emulation decently well, which the base model is about $300, $50 cheaper than something like the Steam Deck, and about $50 cheaper than the Nintendo Switch OLED, which I think is a fair comparison. For that extra $50 though, you are getting a pretty competent portable gaming station that you can play all your favorite Windows and Steam games you could possibly want. Limitations being, if you stick to SteamOS, you do lose all of the games that require things like anti-cheat, or games simply aren't compatible with the Steam Deck, which is a big asterisk. But I think that when you're just comparing these kinds of handhelds like Anbernics and Irons and whatnot, comparing that to the Steam Deck, I don't think that necessarily is a major drawback, because those devices couldn't play any of those games in the first place anyways, but that's neither here nor there. The fact that the Steam Deck not only has all the possible abilities with emulation, it does have the whole thing with being able to play all the Steam games, which for some people that is a massive advantage. I know that's why I got a Steam Deck. I got it not for emulation, but for the primary purpose this thing was even created, was to play AAA video games, which for most people is the primary reason why you buy this device. It's just happenstance or coincidence that it also emulates things very well. So you might play emulation on this device just because you already have it for a different reason. It's the same reason why I recommend people who are new to emulation is if they have an Android phone, test it out on that to see if you're even interested or would probably play it more regularly if you had a dedicated device. I always see people just jumping in and buying the most expensive Odin or buying a Steam Deck or jumping in and just buying a very expensive device before they even really think about whether or not they are interested or would play it consistently enough to warrant dropping upwards of $500 on a device. Tangent aside, the Steam Deck offers a lot of other possibilities than just emulation, opposed to these devices from Neo and whatnot. All do offer great gaming performance limited to emulation in games on Android, which, let's be honest, isn't a huge catalog worth playing, if I'm being honest. A lot of the games worth playing on Android that are native are already on Steam Deck or can be played on other methods like Dead Cells, Genshin Impact, and Stardew Valley. But what the Steam Deck doesn't have that these Android emulation devices have is optimization. There's a huge community out there now causing some rapid development, seeing these emulators get more and more optimized, while most of the emulators you see on the Steam Deck are, I wouldn't say old, but they take longer for any noticeable improvement. It will take a lot more to optimize on the Steam Deck than it would on something like the Odin. The primary handheld I had in mind that I was really comparing the Steam Deck against was the Odin 2. I love my Odin 2. It has been my primary way that I play most of my emulation because of its more simple and just pick up and go sort of play that I can do on that, opposed to the Steam Deck where it's a little bit more involved and takes a little bit more effort. Not to mention that I do run Windows on my Steam Deck, so it is a little bit more complicated to get that whole thing set up than it would be even in SteamOS. Steam Deck offers tremendous value if you aren't solely dedicated on emulation. If you want to do so much more on your device and you want to buy something truly multifaceted and you can use it for so many different things, the Steam Deck is perfect. It can do so much, but it's not particularly fantastic at everything. It's a jack of all trades, master of none sort of situation. You can play all your possible Steam games you want on it, but with the caveat of, not all types of games are playable, like a lot of esports titles have anti-cheat, so you can't really play those on the Steam Deck unless you convert to Windows. You can do serious work on the Steam Deck, but you have to make sure the software you want to use is Linux compatible. The Steam Deck is amazing, but everything you would want to do on it does require some effort to do. That extra layer of friction is a pretty big boundary for most average consumers. If we're talking about pure emulation, that is such a huge demographic of people that spans so many different ages, so many levels of technical ability that if you're new to the scene, or even if you're a veteran and you just want a simple interface, just a device you can grab and go, I can't easily recommend the Steam Deck for that unless you want to do the very heights of emulation that is possible. I simply just wouldn't recommend the Steam Deck for that. I would recommend something like the Odin 2 base model if you want pretty solid emulation all across the board and you want a very easy to understand and use emulation setup. Comes pre-installed with emulators, though it doesn't come with games because that is very much illegal. Nevertheless, companies like Retroid give you a bunch of games and Anbernic gives you a bunch of games when you buy their devices. And you can save a lot more money if you know the kinds of games you want to emulate. You can buy the perfect device for your price point. If you don't want to spend the $300 it takes to get an Odin base model, you could always go and get something like the Retroid Pocket for non-pro. It offers decent performance while being more affordable in comparison to a lot of the other devices out there right now at $150. And if you're a little bit more budget conscious, you could get something like the Anbernic RG35XX Plus or XXH, which is a perfectly solid handheld for less than $70. Now that we're at the end of the video, I'll sort of summarize things, so if you just skip to the end, you'll understand what I was talking about. The Steam Deck is awesome. It does so many things, but I think it's an imperfect solution for those of you out there who are looking for a dedicated emulation handheld. and I recommend just getting a dedicated emulation handheld like the Odin 2 Base or something like the Redmi Pocket 4 Pro. Those two devices are currently some of my favorite handhelds, and I'd love to hear down in the comments below if you are owning any of the devices I mentioned in this video. Do you use your Steam Deck as your dedicated emulation device because that's why you bought it? Or did you buy it for playing Steam games and you just also use it for emulation? I'd love to hear what you guys think down below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. All the other social media garbage down below. And last but not least, have a wonderful day.